Welcome to 7 to 9 Minutes in the Word of God. My name is Brian. I'm one of the pastors at Converge Church in Omaha, Nebraska. The webpage is convergechurchomaha.org, and we have a Converge Church page on Facebook. Please subscribe to that and like that. And then my YouTube channel is called 7 to 9 Minutes in the Word of God, and I would appreciate if you like it and subscribe and even share the videos. In previous episodes, we've looked at the promises of God to us in the Bible. In today's episode of 7 to 9 Minutes in the Word of God, we're going to look at a verse that's not a direct promise from God, but as we unpack it, we will see God's faithfulness and God's concern for us. So the verse we want to focus on in this episode is Psalm 56:8. Psalm 56:8, I'll read it. You have kept count of my tossings. Put my tears in your bottle. Are they not in your book? Allow me to repeat that again, Psalm 56:8. And notice the three statements. The first statement is this: you have kept count of my tossings. And second, put my tears in your bottle. And then three, are they not in your book? We're going to look at each of these three statements. And as we do, we can conclude and then walk away with the truth that God is the only one that we can completely trust because he is greatly concerned for us. So if you have a Bible or a Bible app, I encourage you to turn to Psalm 56 so you can see the very words on the pages or the app. So the first statement is, you have kept count of my tossings. You have kept count of my tossings. God keeps account of our tossings. That's a word that we don't use very often, but the idea here is of grief and sorrow and lament. Think of the times we're tossing and turning in the night, kept awake by our anxieties and our troubles. Tossings could also be translated wanderings. Wanderings are those times when it seems that we have no stability, no roots, and we are tossed and turned by the troubles and trials and heartaches of life. And so that first statement says that God keeps count of our tossings. Every time we lose sleep because worry causes us to toss and turn, God keeps track of that. But it's more than God keeping track. It's more than God just keeping account of our tossings at night. It means that he's fully aware of them, and he's greatly concerned for us and what we're going through. So that brings us to the second statement of Psalm 56:8. Put my tears in your bottle. Put my tears in your bottle. Now, David is the author of this psalm, and he composed it when King Saul was in pursuit of him, and David had to flee for his life, and he ended up in the enemy camp of the Philistines. And his life was in grave danger. The first two verses of Psalm 56, David wrote, "Be gracious to me, O God, for man tramples on me all day long. An attacker oppresses me. My enemies trample on me all day long, for many attack me proudly." So David was amidst his enemies, the Philistines. And in verse 5, he writes that they longed to injure his cause. And in verse 6, David wrote that the Philistines watched his very steps so that they could take his life. So David was in a highly dangerous situation. And you can read about this incident at the end of 1 Samuel chapter 21. But in verse 12 of that chapter, it says that David was much afraid. He was in a dark place, very much afraid. He shed tears because of the life-threatening situation he faced. And David asked God to put his tears in his bottle. Now, God does not have a literal bottle in heaven where he stores our tears, but those words, "put my tears in your bottle," teaches us that God keeps a careful account of our tears. And over the course of our lifetime, our tears may accumulate and could eventually fill several bottles. Maybe you're shedding tears right now. Your tears are in God's bottle. One blogger shared how Psalm 56:8 helped her during her own times of suffering and weeping. Here are her words. "In the deep days of my grieving, mourning losses in my marriage, financial instability, and health, I couldn't help but wonder aloud how the body could keep making such endless tears. Would they ever stop? And when you've cried alone in your bed at night, dear one, I bet you've wondered if there would be an end to your tears as well, or enough jars to hold them. Remember, you're not alone. Remember what David, the great king of Israel, the man after God's own heart, wrote in our key verse, that's Psalm 56:8, to comfort himself and to give meaning to his despair. To give meaning to his despair. That takes us to the third statement of Psalm 56:8. Are they not in your book? Now, this is a rhetorical question. David was not questioning God's doubting he was not questioning or doubting God's concern for him. The point was, are they not in your book, was more of a kind of an explanation point on the verse. Our tears, our concerns, the times we mourn of our loved ones, all these and more are known by God because he's very much aware of them. And he deeply cares for us. Our sorrows, our tears are in God's bottle, and each one is recorded in his book. And like the bottle, the book is not a literal book, but it's a visual reminder of God's awareness and concern for us. And thus, God can be completely trusted. David expressed that in Psalm 58. For example, in verses 3 and 4, he says, when I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. In God whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? David, again, was in the enemy camp. People wanted him dead. He was afraid many times, but each time he trusted God. And during those times, he trusted that God would protect him. Towards the end of the psalm, in verses 10 and 11, David kind of rephrases verses 3 and 4. Verses 10 and 11 says, in God whose word I praise, in the Lord whose word I praise, in God I trust, I shall not be afraid. What can man do to me? So David trusted and praised the Lord even when his life was in danger. And he was able to do that because he knew that God kept count of his sorrows, put his tears in the bottle, and carefully recorded all these in God's book. It doesn't matter what painful situation we're going through right now, God can be completely trusted. I want to thank you for visiting and viewing this 7 to 9 minutes in the Word of God. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, a lot of things that concern us and maybe keep us awake at night. And so if you want to talk message me. If you want me to pray with you, I would be great to do that. I would love to do that. Until next time, may the Lord bless you.